Hi, I'm Beth, creator of dryitcanit.com. I like to talk to you about canning foods, dehydrating foods, providing tips, how-tos, and original recipes. Today I want to talk about canning beans. Beans, not the green beans, but dried beans, kidney beans, black beans, garbanzo beans, all of those fall into that category. And today I'm going to can some chickpeas, or garbanzo beans as they're also known, and some black beans. Now there's several ways to do this, and I'm going to go over the overnight method today, and at the end of the video I'll talk a little bit about the other methods you might want to use. So to do that, what I start with is taking some garbanzo beans and black beans in this case and soaking them overnight. So basically you take your beans, whatever quantity you wanted to do, you rinse them off well, you put them in a pot of water, and you let them sit for 12 to 15 hours. You don't add any salt or anything. So they will slightly hydrate. They're not certainly going to be at the edible stage by any means. And you want to cover the water by at least a couple inches because the beans will expand a little bit overnight or whatever period you're doing it. So I have my garbanzo beans here, and I'm going to drain those. And these have been soaking for about 14 hours. So I'm going to drain those. And then I have my garbanzo beans. And what you're going to do is you're going to drain your beans, and then you're going to actually rinse them off. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the black beans, and then I'll be right back. All right, I took the garbanzo beans and I completely drained the liquid that they sat in overnight, rinsed them really thoroughly in cold water, and put them in a pan. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the black beans that I have. The water actually turns pretty black. And you never want to use the water that you're soaking your beans in because that water actually absorbs some gases, so to speak, from the beans that are very difficult to digest. So in the black bean case, you have, pretty black water. It looks like mud water. So I'm going to take these black beans now and I'm going to rinse them off thoroughly. I'm going to put those in a pan and then I'll be back again. I've rinsed out my black beans and I'm going to put those into a pan. And now that I've got both of my beans rinsed out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put water in both of these pans and I'm going to simmer these or low boil these with a cover on for 30 minutes. And that will further soften the beans. Once that's done, then I'll be back to show you how we prep those for canning. The beans now are on the stove, covered with about 1 inch of water, and I'll bring those to a boil, and when it boils, then I'll turn the heat down to simmer so just the surface is barely breaking and cover them, and that's when I'll start the timer for 30 minutes. The black beans are now boiling, so I'm turning down the heat, I'm putting the cover on, and then I will let those simmer for 30 minutes where the water is just breaking the surface. I'll do the same thing for the garbanzo beans, which aren't quite boiling yet. The garbanzo beans, or the chickpeas, and the black beans have both simmered now for 30 minutes. So I'm ready to put them in my jars. Now I've preheated my jars according to my canning directions, and I still have my other jars in the canner. So I'm going to start with the black beans. And what I'm going to do is you can dish these up and put them in here directly from the pot if you want. I like to drain them a little bit first, and then the liquid's going to be used afterwards, but I think it's easier to get them into the jars this way. And I have to step away and get a spoon. I have a spoon now. All right, so basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fill my jars with the beans that I have soaked overnight and that I have simmered for 30 minutes. And remember, I drained the water after I soaked them overnight, rinsed them in cold water, and then simmered them. Now, I'm going to leave 1 inch of headspace in each of these. And I started with the chickpeas and the black beans. I started with 2 cups of dried beans. So what I'm going to do is fill each of my jars, like so, leaving about a 1 inch headspace, which basically is going to be to that bottom ridge in your jar. This one needs just a little bit more. I'm going to move this so that you can see it. So I have those filled like so. Then what you can do is you can use the water that you cooked the beans in, not the water that you soaked them in overnight, to fill the jars. And that's what I'm going to do here. I know the black bean water isn't very pretty, but it works. Then I also have some hot water here that I boiled simply because I know that this isn't going to be enough water. I'm going to debubble my jars. So debubbling, remember, is really important to get the bubbles out because that can interfere with the pressure canning. Now, in case you're wondering, why did the black beans come to a simmer and a boil before the chickpeas? Well, it has to do with density. The beans, frankly, are bigger, so they take longer to get heated up, and thus the water takes longer to heat up. That same concept works with pressure canning. When you have food that's more dense, you have to pressure can longer than food that's less dense. So now I have these both filled. I'm going to put just a little bit more water to bring it up to that 1 inch of head space, like so. Then I'm going to take a clean dish towel and wipe the rims just to make sure that there is no liquid on those. And then I'm going to go ahead and put the lids on each of them. And again, I'm going to do the same process for the chickpeas. I'm going to put the screw bands on and just until they're finger tight. And then I'm going to place them into the canner. So just finger tight. Now I know some people have said they've been having trouble with their new ball lids. I haven't had any trouble. Two things to remember. One is that you should wash your lids when you take them out of the box. Wash them before you use them, which I always do. And also, if you look at the back of the box, these no longer have to be sanitized in hot water before you use them. I don't know if the people that are having trouble are doing those things or it's just coincident. I also believe that if you over tighten your lid, that can be a problem also. So I'm going to continue to fill my jars with my black beans and my garbanzo beans, and then I will be back. I completed filling the black beans. Those 2 cups of dried black beans gave me 3 pints, just a little bit shy of 3 pints of black beans ready to be canned. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the garbanzo beans. Now when you're canning beans, you can choose to put salt in your containers if you want. I did not for the black beans, but I will be doing that for the chickpeas, simply because that's the way I prefer them. So the rule of thumb is you can put a half a teaspoon of salt in a pint and a teaspoon in a quart. So I'm doing that with the garbanzo beans. I like to use these for salads especially, but I also like using them for recipes. And I'm going to have recipes available for the black beans and the garbanzo beans as I finish these up. So same procedure basically, where I'm going to fill my jars to about 1 inch headspace, both of them. And then I'm going to use the liquid from the garbanzo beans to fill that. And if I don't have enough water, then I'm going to supplement that with some boiling water. So starting with hot jars, hot beans, and hot liquid. Excuse me. Like so. All right. Now, the interesting thing about garbanzo bean liquid is it's actually called fava. And believe it or not, you can whip this and make like a whipped cream out of it. And one of these days I'll do a program on that. But the juice on the garbanzo beans is sort of like magic juice, they say. So, filled it with liquid. I have the salt. I'm going to debubble. Again, debubbling, make sure that you get the bubbles out. Doesn't interfere with the process of the canning process. My beans are covered. They're at the inch port that I want. I'm going to wipe off my rims, just like I did before. Put on my lids, centering those. This is a slick tool because you don't have to actually get your fingerprints or the oils from your hands on there. Use your screw caps. These jars are hot. Just past finger tight. Just really a little bit past the point of resistance, if you will. Didn't quite get that one on straight. And then into the canner these will go. Now, when I get done putting the rest of the chickpeas or the garbanzo beans into jars, I'm going to be pressure canning both the black beans and the garbanzo beans for 75 minutes. 90 minutes if you're using quarts. So, I'll be back after these are pressure canned. My cans of beans, 2 cups of black beans, 2 cups of garbanzo beans, each gave me 3 pints of black beans or garbanzo beans. I thought maybe I would have a 4th one for the chickpeas. But what I'm showing you here is that I arranged my jars around the edge of my canner. I left the opening in the middle and I didn't put a jar there, simply because you want your jars to be as evenly distributed as possible. Could I put a jar in the middle and the other 5 around it? Yes. But always distribute your jars as evenly as you can for the best pressure canning results. All right, I'm back and my canner is beeping because it literally just finished. So what we did is we pressure canned some black beans and some chickpeas, and let's take a look and see what they look like. Take them out here, and let's see what we've got. I do smell the chickpeas a little bit, so that makes me think I have a little bit of siphoning, and I wondered if I should have left maybe 1.5 inches of head space, just because maybe the chickpeas were going to expand a little bit. But they look pretty good. Yep, I think we're good there. What I don't see, which I think is a little bit strange, on this one I do, I see the water kind of moving up, so I know that this is still, you know, under pressure. I don't know if I see this on this first one. This might be the one that's siphoned, because I don't see bubbles moving on that. Normally I do, so that is a little bit of a sign for me to see what happens. So for example, on this now, you can really see the bubbles. I think you can see the bubbles really moving on this, so you know that that's under pressure. So those are the 3 chickpeas. Let's see if I can get the black beans out of here. Yep, and those are bubbling really well too. So I think that those are good. And my water is clear, so I know that the black beans didn't siphon at all. So these were each pressure canned for 75 minutes. If I was doing quarts, then I would do those for 90 minutes. And so the only one I'm concerned about really is this one, because I just don't see any bubble action in it. Now that doesn't mean that it's not safe. So what I'm going to do, obviously, is we're going to let these cool for 12 to 24 hours. We're going to listen for that pop, and we're going to check the lids after the 12 or 24 hours. You know that your canning is good and your lids are good when you push down on those and there's no give. If I push down on right now, you would hear a little pop and it would seal, but it needs to seal by itself, so it's important to leave these undisturbed. So I will be back tomorrow morning, because it is 4 o'clock in the afternoon here, so I will be back tomorrow morning with these, and we'll wrap this session up. But you'll find and see that beans of all kinds are really pretty easy to can, and certainly a lot healthier than having them you know, purchased when you have lots of salt and other things in them that maybe you don't really want to have. So stay tuned and we'll wrap this up tomorrow. All of my jars successfully sealed. I had them sitting overnight, and again, to check a seal, you just want to push on the can and there should be no, or the lid rather, and there should be no give. If there is give, you need to put it aside and or reprocess it. You safely can consume it, however. You might recall when I took these out of the canner, I had 1 jar of garbanzo beans where I didn't have the boiling water on the side that I usually see. I put an X on the top of the lid to mark that so I knew which one it was, and I researched that last night and couldn't find any authoritative source as to what that was or why that happened. This is probably safe because it was canned under the same conditions as the rest of these, and it did successfully seal. But because it's a one-off and I haven't experienced it before, I am putting this jar aside and I'm going to use it in the next couple of days just to be extra safe. So with each of these, I started with 2 cups of dry beans. I soaked them overnight. I dumped that water. Then I went ahead and processed them as you saw in the video. The other method for hydrating your beans before you process them would be to rinse your beans off, put them in water, bring the water to a boil, take it off the stove or turn your stove off, put a cover on it and let them sit for an hour. Now, that water also has to be dumped because you never want to use the liquid that you hydrated your beans in. I have questions sometimes about, can I use an Instant Pot? An Instant Pot is generally a cooker and not a canner. And I think they're coming out or have come out with a model that is also a canner, but don't use your cooker as a canner. you certainly can use your Instant Pot to hydrate your beans, and I have done that. So depending upon the beans, if it's a black bean, I'll put them in the Instant Pot sometimes and hydrate them for about 4 or 5 minutes. With the chickpeas, I'll hydrate them usually for about 8 minutes. Again, I dump that water and then go ahead and rinse the beans off, and then go ahead and add boiling water, you know, when I'm getting ready to can these. So those are the methods you can use. You can choose to use salt or not salt. I did not put salt in the black beans. I did decide to do it in the chickpeas. Generally, if you're doing pints, you can put a ½ teaspoon of salt in if you want to. If you're doing quarts, 1 teaspoon. I process these for 75 minutes. If you're using quarts, be sure to use 90 minutes. And again, check your canning guide and your altitude for any adjustments you need to make. So hopefully you found this video worthwhile. Canning your own beans is great because you know exactly what's in them. I like to use organic beans, and I like to control the amount of salt that I have in them. So give me a thumbs up if you learned something from the video. I would love to have you subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing more tips and talking about canning and dehydrating, as well as sharing original recipes. So thanks for watching, and happy canning.